The movie looks at aspects of our voting system that undermine democracy, that conflict with some of our promises and ideals.
There are 13,000 election districts in the United States, and so we've got a hodgepodge of rules governing who gets to vote, when they get to vote, what the hours are, how the ballots are designed, and it creates a quirky, messy, and sometimes exuberant and fun system.
The right to vote is not explicitly guaranteed by the Constitution, and that does come as kind of a surprise and a shock to many people.
We have managed, obviously, over the course of time to pass 8 constitutional amendments that deal with voting. We've had 2 epic social movements for women and African Americans to gain the right to vote. We had the youthquake of the 1970s and the epical lawmaking of the 1960s. All those have cumulatively led most Americans to feel a certain level of comfort about the way we vote in America. But when you start kind of lifting the covers and looking what's happened since 2000, it turns out voting can be a pretty haphazard experience in America today.
So whereas the right to freedom of speech or freedom of religion does not vary from state to state, voting rights are controlled by the states, and therefore there's a huge variation among the states in how they treat voting issues, and that has some very real consequences.
Most of our voting and election systems are administered by partisans, by Republicans or Democrats, as the case might be, and they use their power in many cases to benefit their particular party or to benefit people who are running for their particular party.
How do we treat people who are convicted of felonies in terms of their status as voters? In some states, like Vermont, you can vote while you're in prison as an absentee voter. So in that state, you're considered a voter even if you're convicted of a felony. In other states, like Mississippi, you're permanently disenfranchised for life unless the governor passes a personalized bill granting you or restoring your voting rights. And so there's this really chilling story in the film of a guy from Mississippi who had been convicted of a felony, got out of prison, wasn't aware that he was disenfranchised, was actually still on the voting rolls, voted in 2 separate elections, and was prosecuted for the crime of voting and is now serving a 10-year sentence.
I think what we need to do is establish a sort of Federal Reserve Board for voting. We've taken politics out of monetary policy in the United States. I think we ought to be able to take politics out of voting in America.
It's one thing to say we want to prevent voter fraud, and that's another big realm that we look at in the film, questions of voter ID and voter fraud. But to say that this guy from Mississippi committed voter fraud, I think is an oversimplification.
I think they should care for the same reason that I care. And that's because every time I walk into the ballot box, I feel power. And I know that I've made my mark upon the history of America.
It's about having our voices heard, and it's about actually participating in American democracy as full citizens. We have this notion that we have elections, but sometimes the outcome of those elections doesn't reflect what the voters actually want. And so that's why I think, focusing on the system and the administration and the process of voting is actually fundamentally important.